Have you ever noticed that most men don't see betrayal coming when it finally happens? Not because they're foolish, not because they don't care, but because the signs they expect to see are usually not the signs that actually appear. A lot of men imagine cheating begins with secret messages, sudden distance, or obvious lies. They think the moment a relationship is in danger, alarms start ringing. But that's rarely how it feels from the inside. It feels normal. That's what makes it dangerous. And before we go any further, if you've ever spent nights replaying conversations in your head, trying to understand what really happened in a relationship, subscribe. Not because I want another number on a screen, but because these conversations are for the people who think deeply and sometimes think alone. Now let me tell you something uncomfortable. Most women do not wake up one morning and decide to betray someone they love. The emotional process usually starts much earlier, months earlier, sometimes even years. And during that period, certain statements begin appearing in conversations. Statements that sound harmless, reasonable, even loving. The problem is not the words themselves. The problem is what may be happening underneath them. And today we're going to talk about 4 of those statements. Not because every woman who says them is cheating, that would be unfair. Relationships are more complicated than that. But because these phrases often appear when emotional distance is growing beneath the surface, while the relationship still looks intact from the outside. The first lie is one that catches men off guard because it sounds so mature, so calm, so reassuring. She looks at you and says, "I'm just stressed." Now, sometimes that's completely true. Life is hard, work is exhausting, family problems are real, people go through difficult seasons. But here's what many men miss. When emotional disconnection starts happening, stress becomes the easiest explanation available. It's clean, it's understandable, nobody argues with stress. And little by little, every change gets placed inside that explanation. She's less affectionate, she's stressed. She's texting less, she's stressed. She seems emotionally absent, she's stressed. The explanation becomes so familiar that nobody examines it anymore. I remember a client once describing the final year of his relationship. He told me, "I spent 12 months trying to help her feel less stressed." That sentence stayed with me, because while he was solving the problem she described, he never stopped to ask whether that was the real problem. And that's where many men get trapped. Their loyalty becomes focused on fixing circumstances. Meanwhile, emotional intimacy quietly disappears. The hardest part? The man often feels guilty for even questioning it. Because if someone says they're stressed, challenging that explanation feels insensitive. So he stays patient, he waits, he gives space, he becomes more understanding. And while he's trying to be a good partner, he's sometimes missing a deeper shift taking place underneath everything. A shift that has very little to do with stress, and much more to do with emotional investment moving somewhere else. Not always toward another man, sometimes toward a fantasy, sometimes toward a different version of life, sometimes toward an emotional connection that hasn't fully crossed a line yet. But the movement has already begun, and most men don't recognize it because they're listening to the explanation instead of noticing the pattern. The second lie is even more subtle, because unlike the first one, it doesn't create concern, it creates relief. And that's exactly why so many men miss it. The words usually sound something like this: "Nothing is wrong." Simple, calm, almost comforting. You notice a change in her energy. Maybe she's quieter than usual. Maybe she seems emotionally somewhere else. Maybe she laughs less, touches you less, looks at you differently. Not with anger, not with resentment, just differently. So naturally you ask, "Are you okay?" And she smiles. Maybe not a full smile, just enough. Then she says, "Nothing is wrong." Now here's something fascinating about human psychology. People often tell the truth through their behavior long before they tell it through their words. The body usually speaks first. The emotions speak first. The distance speaks first. Words come later, much later. That's why some men become confused after a breakup. They say things like, "I thought everything was fine." But when they tell the story, it becomes clear things were not fine at all. Communication had changed. Affection had changed, presence had changed, the relationship had changed. The only thing that hadn't changed was the official explanation. And that explanation was, nothing is wrong. Again, this isn't about accusing women. Men do this too. People avoid difficult conversations all the time, especially when they're confused about their own emotions, especially when they don't want conflict, especially when they haven't fully admitted something to themselves yet. But here's the part that most men never think about. When someone repeatedly says nothing is wrong while acting as though something is wrong, you're no longer receiving information. You're receiving reassurance, and those are not the same thing. Information helps you understand reality. Reassurance helps you tolerate uncertainty. One reveals, the other calms. Many men become addicted to reassurance, not because they're weak, because they're exhausted, because the alternative is scary. The alternative means admitting something feels off, and once you admit that, you can't unsee it. I once spoke with a man who told me he spent months convincing himself he was imagining things. Months. He noticed emotional distance. He noticed new boundaries. He noticed a growing sense that he was no longer the first person she wanted to share things with. But every time he brought it up, the answer stayed the same. You're overthinking. Nothing is wrong. So eventually he stopped asking. And that's the moment that caught my attention. Because when a person stops asking questions, it doesn't always mean they're reassured. Sometimes it means they're surrendering their intuition. They're choosing comfort over clarity. And clarity is often uncomfortable, painfully uncomfortable. Because sometimes your instincts aren't telling you that someone is cheating. Sometimes they're simply telling you that emotional intimacy is fading. But either way, the signal matters. What many men miss is that betrayal rarely begins with physical actions. It often begins with emotional withdrawal, a gradual movement away from openness, away from vulnerability, away from truth. And when that process is happening, nothing is wrong can become one of the safest hiding places available. Not because the words are convincing, but because the person hearing them desperately wants them to be true. And that desire can blind even the smartest man in the room, especially when love is involved, especially when he's still fighting for something he believes can be saved. The third lie is the one that hurts the most when a man finally understands it. Because on the surface, it sounds like loyalty. It sounds respectful. It sounds like reassurance. She says, he's just a friend. Now, before we go any further, let me be very clear. Men and women absolutely can be friends. Healthy friendships exist. Meaningful friendships exist. Not every friendship is a threat to a relationship. The problem isn't the friendship itself. The problem is when emotional boundaries begin shifting in ways that nobody wants to acknowledge. And that's where things become complicated. Because emotional affairs rarely announce themselves. They don't arrive wearing warning signs. They usually begin with conversations, comfort, understanding, a feeling of being seen, a feeling of being heard. Sometimes even a feeling of being understood in ways that have slowly disappeared inside the relationship. And here's what many men miss. People don't usually compare partners to other people consciously, but emotionally, it happens all the time. A woman has a difficult day. She talks to him. She feels understood. She laughs. She feels lighter. Then she comes home, and without realizing it, her emotional world has started creating comparisons. Not because she's trying to betray anyone, because human beings naturally move toward places where they feel emotionally alive. That's why emotional connections can become dangerous long before anything physical happens. The real warning sign isn't that another man exists. The warning sign is when emotional energy begins flowing toward him that once flowed toward the relationship. When exciting stories go to him first, when frustrations go to him first, when emotional comfort comes from him first, when validation comes from him first. That's when something important is changing, and often the woman herself may not fully understand what's happening. People like certainty. Reality is usually messier. Sometimes emotional attachment grows gradually, quietly, without intention, without a clear starting point, which is why the phrase, "he's just a friend," can become more complicated than it sounds. Not because it's always false, but because sometimes it's technically true while emotionally incomplete. And emotionally incomplete truths can be incredibly misleading. I remember a conversation with a man who told me something I'll never forget. He said, I wasn't worried about the other guy because she kept telling me there was nothing romantic happening. Then he paused and added, but eventually I realized romance wasn't the first thing I should have been paying attention to. That sentence carries a lot of wisdom, because relationships are not built only on romance. They're built on emotional intimacy, attention, trust, connection, presence. And when those things start relocating somewhere else, the relationship begins feeling different long before anybody admits why. The tragedy is that many men focus entirely on physical betrayal. Meanwhile, emotional distance keeps growing in plain sight. They watch for secret meetings, but ignore disappearing conversations. They watch for obvious lies, but ignore fading openness. They watch for evidence while missing patterns. And patterns are often where the real story lives. Not in one message, not in one conversation, not in one friendship, but in the slow movement of emotional investment from one place to another. A movement so gradual that by the time it becomes obvious, the relationship may already be standing much closer to the edge than either person realizes. The fourth lie is probably the most dangerous one, not because it sounds suspicious, because it sounds mature, responsible, even noble. She looks at you and says, I just need some space. Now, sometimes that is exactly what she means. Healthy people need space. Healthy relationships need breathing room. Nobody should be emotionally attached at the hip every hour of every day. Real love allows individuality. Real love allows distance. But here's what many men never learn. There is a huge difference between space that creates connection and space that quietly replaces it. The difference is almost invisible at first. One kind of space feels temporary. The other feels like an exit disguised as a pause. And unfortunately, many men cannot tell the difference because they are focused on the words instead of the emotional direction. Think about it. When someone genuinely wants to preserve a relationship, distance often comes with reassurance. There is effort, there is communication, there is a visible desire to reconnect. You feel the relationship stretching, not disappearing. But when emotional investment has already started fading, space can serve a different purpose. It can create emotional freedom without requiring emotional honesty. It can delay difficult conversations. It can reduce guilt. It can provide room for someone to explore feelings they are not ready to admit out loud. And from the outside, everything still looks reasonable. That's why this situation becomes so confusing. The man wants to be respectful. He doesn't want to seem controlling. He doesn't want to pressure her. So he gives the space, then more space, then even more, all while quietly hoping the relationship will return to what it used to be. But hope can sometimes become a substitute for awareness, and that's where pain begins. Because while he's waiting for reconnection, he may not notice that reconnection is no longer her goal. I remember hearing a man describe the final months before his relationship ended. He said something heartbreaking. He told me, the strange thing wasn't that she asked for space. The strange thing was that she seemed happier the further away she became. That observation stayed with me, because emotional withdrawal often reveals itself through relief, not hostility, not arguments, not drama, relief. The relationship starts feeling lighter to the person who is pulling away, while simultaneously feeling heavier to the person who is holding on. And that's a painful dynamic, because the man often responds by trying harder. He becomes more available, more patient, more understanding. Meanwhile, the emotional gap keeps widening, not because he's doing something wrong, but because effort cannot repair a problem that honesty refuses to address. And this is where many men accidentally betray themselves. Not by trusting, trust is beautiful. Not by loving, love matters. They betray themselves by refusing to acknowledge what they already feel. Deep down, they sense the shift. They notice the absence. They feel the difference. But they keep negotiating with reality because reality hurts. So they tell themselves everything will return to normal. Everything will make sense soon. Everything will work itself out. Sometimes it does. But sometimes the hardest truth is that people begin leaving emotionally long before they leave physically. And when that happens, space isn't creating distance. It's simply revealing distance that already existed. Now, after hearing all four of these statements, some men make a mistake. A very understandable mistake. They start looking backward. They replay every relationship they've ever had, every conversation, every text message, every moment where a woman said she was stressed, every time she said nothing was wrong, every friendship they didn't understand, every request for space. And suddenly they begin connecting dots everywhere. But I want you to be careful here, because the purpose of understanding psychology is not to become suspicious of everyone. It's not to walk through life assuming betrayal is hiding around every corner. That kind of thinking doesn't protect your heart. It slowly hardens it. And a hardened heart isn't wisdom. It's fear wearing the mask of wisdom. The deeper lesson is something much more uncomfortable. Most relationship problems are not hidden because the signs are invisible. They're hidden because people don't want to believe what they're feeling, including men, especially men. Because many men are taught to endure discomfort, to stay loyal, to keep trying, to be patient. Those qualities are admirable until they become reasons to ignore reality. And that's where things get complicated, because loyalty without awareness can become self-abandonment. You start fighting for a relationship that no longer exists in the form you're trying to save. You start protecting a future that only one person is still imagining. You start investing emotional energy into a version of the relationship that survives mostly in memory. And that creates a very specific kind of loneliness. A loneliness that exists even when someone is sitting right beside you. I think that's one of the most painful experiences a man can have. Not being physically alone, being emotionally alone while pretending everything is fine, smiling during conversations that feel empty, sharing a home that no longer feels emotionally shared, listening to reassuring words while sensing a completely different reality underneath them. And the mind begins a strange battle. One side whispers, "Something feels wrong." The other side says, "You're overthinking." One side notices patterns, the other side searches for excuses. One side wants clarity, the other side wants comfort, and comfort usually wins, at least for a while. Because clarity often demands difficult decisions, difficult conversations, difficult truths. What I've noticed over the years is that intuition is rarely loud. It doesn't scream, it doesn't create dramatic speeches, it doesn't arrive with certainty. It usually arrives as a quiet feeling that keeps returning, a feeling you cannot completely explain, a feeling you keep dismissing, until eventually you realize it never left. Now, that doesn't mean your intuition is always correct. Human beings can be insecure. We can project fears. We can misread situations. But dismissing your feelings completely is just as dangerous as blindly trusting them. The healthiest path is curiosity. Not accusation, not paranoia, curiosity. The willingness to ask honest questions. The willingness to observe reality without forcing it to match what you hope is true. Because healthy relationships can survive honest conversations. In fact, they usually become stronger because of them. It's the relationships built on avoidance that struggle when truth enters the room. And truth always enters eventually, even when everyone involved tries to keep it outside. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this conversation, it's not that women are deceptive. It's not that relationships are dangerous, and it's definitely not that trust is a mistake. The lesson is much simpler than that. People often reveal the truth emotionally before they reveal it verbally. And once you understand that, you start paying attention differently. Not with suspicion, with awareness. Because the strongest men I've ever met weren't the men who never got hurt. They weren't the men who could detect every lie. They weren't the men who controlled every situation. They were the men who stayed connected to reality, even when reality was painful. That sounds simple, but it's incredibly difficult, especially when love is involved. Love has a strange way of making us negotiate with things we would immediately recognize in any other situation. You see the change, you feel the distance, you notice the inconsistency. But because you care, you keep giving the situation another explanation, another chance, another month, another conversation. And sometimes that's the right choice. Relationships deserve effort. Relationships deserve patience. People go through difficult seasons. Nobody is emotionally perfect. But effort should move in both directions. That's the part many men forget. A healthy relationship isn't one person carrying hope for two people. It isn't one person doing all the emotional work. It isn't one person constantly explaining away patterns that continue repeating. At some point, reality matters more than promises. Patterns matter more than explanations. Consistency matters more than reassurance. And when you truly understand that, something changes inside you. You stop obsessing over catching betrayal. You stop searching for secret clues. You stop becoming a detective in your own relationship. Instead, you begin paying attention to something much more important: reciprocity, presence, emotional availability, the feeling that two people are genuinely moving toward each other rather than away from each other. Because here's the truth, most men learn far too late. The biggest warning sign is rarely another man. It's emotional disconnection. It's when conversations become shallower, when curiosity disappears, when vulnerability fades, when emotional intimacy slowly stops growing. That's the place where relationships either heal or quietly begin breaking apart. And if you're watching this tonight, maybe because someone is on your mind, maybe because a past relationship still confuses you, or maybe because something in your current relationship feels difficult to explain, I want to leave you with one final thought. Do not ignore your feelings, but do not become controlled by them either. Listen to them, explore them, respect them, then compare them to reality. Because maturity isn't believing every fear, and it isn't dismissing every concern. It's having the courage to face what is actually there, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it challenges what you hoped was true. The men who grow the most after heartbreak are not the ones who learn how to trust nobody. They're the ones who learn how to trust themselves. Not blindly, not arrogantly, but calmly, quietly, honestly. And when a man reaches that place, something remarkable happens. He stops chasing certainty from other people because he has built something stronger inside himself. The ability to see clearly, the ability to stay grounded, and the ability to walk away from illusions before they become wounds. If this conversation gave a name to something you've been feeling but couldn't quite explain, stay with us. There are more conversations ahead for men who want clarity, self-respect, and a deeper understanding of relationships, not through fear, but through truth.